So, if you're a creator or an entrepreneur that is currently struggling with distractions and don't know how to overcome them, then this video is for you. I did a little presentation a few days ago within some members of my school community and other community owners and members about why we get so distracted in the first place and tackling the root cause behind it so that we can use these mental tools that I have within to be able to navigate these root issues and be able to tackle them sustainably and long term. If that's interesting to you, then check out this video. Have a good one. In this presentation, I will be going through why we get distracted, tackling the root cause behind why it is that we get so distracted and pull us away from the things that we actually want to focus on. So we'll be diving right into that. So I'll break through a scenario that all of you might be familiar with. You sit down, you try to get the work done. Minutes pass by, and suddenly you're hit with thoughts in your head that are not conducive to the work. And your mind suddenly drifts to past events, random ideas, what you should be doing instead, and sometimes even negative self talk that pulls you away. And this chatter in your head is relentless. It's something that you feel like you can't control. And these anxious thoughts, these things that are racing your head, can inevitably lead you down the path of least resistance just to try to please yourself in the moment to avoid these negative thoughts. So you end up checking your phone, end up playing a game, you watch your latest Netflix show that you've been obsessive over, or even doing some other random task that feels productive, but you know it's not the right thing to do at the given time. And see, our mind craves this dopamine, so our mind does, but it doesn't care what the source is because we like instant gratification. We love this pleasure. We're driven to these sorts of things. So the easiest way to satisfy these cravings is to give in to the pleasure at the moment. But we all know where that leads. And it's not just because we're lazy. There is a root cause, and it's not from our phones. It's not from the Netflix or the video games, the pornography, like all these vices that we give blame to. There's something deeper. And my promise to you is by the end of the session, you'll understand what's really happening underneath and have the mental tools to build real lasting focus. And why should you listen to me at this point? Like, why do I have the credibility to talk about sort of these sorts of things? So, like I said, I'm Brandon Smith. I am actually a former United States Marine, and I've gone through 6 years of honorable service within the military. And believe it or not, though, even though it seemed like I was disciplined and ultra focused on the outside, I was really lost on the inside. Whenever I would come back home from my duties, I would just go back home and spend like in a like an unhuman or ungodly amount of time in front of the screen, buried in distractions, video games, pornography, social media, doom scrolling, all these things that were hindering me from what I actually wanted to do in my life. And this led me into a state of depression. It caused me to feel isolated from friends and family, and I felt really hopeless. Um, and even during the time of the military, I was just going through this uh, dark, dark hole in my life. And what I really wanted was purpose, clarity, a reason to actually get up in the morning. And even though like the military tried to do its best to fulfill that for me, there was also something deeper within me that the military couldn't fulfill. But I've been able to overcome a lot of these things using a lot of these tools that I now have in my tool belt. Now I've been able to build a, a beautiful school community of almost 190 people at this point. I think over 190 people at this point. Been able to greatly improve my self discipline, My own mental health is massively improved. I'm in the best shape of my life even after serving in the Marine Corps, which I got out about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago at this point. I grew a beautiful, amazing connections with so many successful entrepreneurs, creators, people on the school platform, and has really given me a sense of purpose and clarity behind what I really wanted in my life. And I've been able to help dozens of other creators reclaim their own time and attention online using a lot of the tools and experiences that I've learned throughout my time in the military and throughout my time trying to create a community and trying to create a business around it. And my mission here is to help 1 million people win the war for their attention. Because at this point in time in the 21st century, attention is the new oil. And there are so many people, there are so many things that are taking up our attention, whether it be social media, ads, uh, there conflicting opinions online. There's so many news world events that are happening that are just bombarding our minds, and it's so hard to actually concentrate on what matters. And like, there's so much information to process, and we can't. As humans, we weren't meant to process so much of this information that's coming to us. So this is something that I want to help people overcome. Um, so the root cause behind all these are internal triggers. It's not so much the external things that are coming at us. Like I said, there are a lot of things that are coming to us, like social media ads, influencers trying to bombard us with information. But there's also something deeper within us, and these are the internal triggers. And what are these internal triggers? These are uncomfortable emotional states that we seek to escape, and these can be from anywhere from hunger, anger, boredom, isolation, or loneliness, uh, sleepiness, tired, or stressed. And as you might tell, I actually have this as an acronym called HABITS, which is something I picked up from one of my good buddies that I was in a small group with, and I'm involved in a church. And he talked with a pastor that has this. He has a sticky note right in front of like where he's working in his office, and he has a sticky note that says focus, and another sticky note that says habits, and it breaks it down from these emotional states. And it's interesting to me because like when we feel these emotions, when we feel these things happen, it can really wither our ability to focus on what actually matters. So if we can find that self-awareness, and I'll get to that in a moment, if we have that self-awareness, we can understand like how to actually shift back and center into focus. And like I said, internal triggers account for a lot, the majority of our distractions, upwards of 90%, while only 10% are external. So the environment that you're in, they can be impactful, but there's something deeper within. And if we could bring awareness to these internal triggers, that's the vast majority of the battle. And we can start addressing more of those external things later on. But once we can actually start having that self-awareness first, that is the biggest thing. So one of the exercises that I love to do, and it's something that I encourage you to do starting moving forward, is if you notice that you are um, having these sorts of feelings, or even if it's hard for you to have this self awareness, and you notice you pick your go to like the path of least resistance, like I mentioned, picking up the phone, or like trying to do some random task or do something that's not conducive to the work that you're doing. I suggest having a notebook or a journal um, as a way of writing down these feelings that you feel in the moment. And as you feel this uncomfortable emotion, acknowledge it by writing it down. If you acknowledge it first, you can start addressing the more the root cause. And this is a practice that I've been doing a lot lately, especially recently. A lot of the times I feel bored or sometimes anxious. So, like boredom for me is a common feeling. I'm sure is a common feeling for a lot of you. Boredom or even stress. And if you can acknowledge that feeling and just sit there for a moment, if you just understand like where it's coming from, why you're feeling that emotion, then you can start addressing it further. And while it's hard at first, it's a skill to develop. The self-awareness is might not be something that um, you can easily pick up on. It's hard to do in the moment, and it's but like anything, it's a skill. And developing that understanding of the source of the emotion, why it's happening, is going to set you up for success in the long term. And there was a scripture, there's a verse that I love. I have it come from a Christian background, and it says Second Corinthians 10:5, take captive every thought, and make it obedient to Christ. So I don't know like everyone else's beliefs here, but I love this because if we can actually take captive, like if we capture these thoughts that are happening, because these thoughts are inevitable, like uh, thoughts that are not supportive of our goals, even evil thoughts, intrusive thoughts. Like we have these thoughts that aren't going to support what we actually want to accomplish. Take captive these thoughts. That's why I said write it down. Of course, like obedient to Christ. For me, I want to give these thoughts to Him. So I want to just I like to emphasize the taking captive of every thought. So like if you can capture those thoughts on paper, even that's going to be a tremendous help for you, in my opinion. Um, and at this point, once we're able to have these internal triggers addressed, that's the 90% of the work. We can start addressing the next 10%, which are the external triggers. And our external environment can influence our mental focus, and what you can see can drive where your thoughts go. And believe it or not, mental focus follows visual focus. So we have two options here. We can have, uh, so you might have noticed if you could look at a small region of space, you have precision. Yeah, it's like high resolution. So if you're like looking at the text right now, you could clearly read it, but everything else outside of your environment is blurry. You can't really focus on it because you're focusing on one tiny detail. But you could also choose to see big pieces of visual space. So if you scan your environment, if you're not focused on one specific thing, then you're going to have little detail. You're not going to be able to capture the details of every specific thing. And actually, the focus in the brain is anchored in our visual system, assuming you're sighted. There's also ways of having focus outside of visual. Like if you're not sighted, of course, I'm assuming everyone is, um, but there are ways for blind people to actually use um, focus through hearing or other senses, mainly through hearing. So if you want to learn how to have better cognitive and mental focus, learn to focus visually first. So, one of the things you could do is start to minimize the visual stimuli, the things that activate these internal triggers. So, if that's your phone for you, if you're, so for me, I like to keep my phone away from my room whenever I'm doing deep creative work, especially like when I was making this presentation, for example, I just kept my phone away from the room because I just wanted to reduce a lot of the visual stimulus that would cause me to be pulled away from my work, or that could be Netflix for you, or the gaming consoles, or anything that pulls you away um, from doing the task at hand. And there's another verse that I like to see that I like to envision for y'all. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. In Proverbs 4:25. And there's no coincidence that it says that, because this is your visual focus. If you look straight ahead and fix your gaze before something, you're going to truly focus on what actually matters in that moment. So another exercise that you can take out of this is if uh, You want to mark a time in your calendar for a specific task, whatever that is the case for you. So 90 minutes, 60 minutes, 30 minutes, it doesn't really matter. Um, it just depends on like how you however amount of time you can commit to focus, because focus is also a skill that you want to develop. It's not going to be something that you can automatically have overnight and just be able to commit for hours at a time. It's a skill to develop. And before that time, try to remove any potential external distractors like your phone. That for me, I like to remove it from my environment as best as possible, or those other things as well. So, and what you want to do within this time is commit to the task. And like I said, you want to have the journal ready. So when you notice these thoughts, these internal triggers that happen, the boredom, the anxiety, the hunger, um, these states, you want to acknowledge them while you're doing these tasks, and also limit the amount of sources of information your brain needs to process. So a good analogy that I like to think about is where our brains are like a supercomputer, but the RAM is like super tiny. It's like maybe a megabyte or less. Because we can't process so much information all at once. And if our visual focus is constantly shifting from the task at hand and maybe another tab on your computer, or you have the phone on your desk, or you have so many papers and notes and like things that are pulling you away from the task. Your brain is processing so much information at once, so you want to limit the amount of sources of information that your brain needs to process. And this is that comes back down to the visual focus. Now, another thing I want to talk about is discernment of distraction. What do we define as distraction and what isn't? Because there can be certain times where distraction can serve us. Not all distraction is a bad thing. I'll be clear about this. Not all distraction is a bad thing. Sometimes they can serve us. But what are the things that are pulling us away from doing what we actually want to achieve? We need to make that discernment for ourselves. And even though I've talked about focus, what is the true opposite of distraction? It's not necessarily focus, even though we did talk about focus and these are important, but it's actually traction. Traction. So, distraction is any action that pulls you away from your goals. So, is a great visual reminder. But traction is any action that pulls you toward your goals. And notice how I underlined and bolded action. Both of these are actions. And so I will share some personal examples of certain goals for me that are part of my goals. So at this point, I'd love to be able to sign 5 clients for my program before 2026. That's one of my goals. I want to stay in good physical shape. So running out in the snow, I like to be able to go for my runs, work out whenever I can. So that's another part of my goals. Another very specific goal, be able to fluently play "Nothing Else Matters" by Metallica on the guitar. This is one of my specific goals, something that I love. Uh, I'm loving to be able to pick up the guitar and to learn all this. So it's something that's a goal of mine. And to finish this presentation before Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which we're doing right now, that was one of my goals. So that was a very specific thing. So if I wanted to have these goals in mind, I need to kind of create a filter for myself and understand, does the activity that I'm doing give me traction towards my goals or not? Are the actions I'm doing conducive to the work or the goals that I have in mind, or are they something that's pulling me away from my goals? So that's something to keep in mind. But also, not every non work thing is a distraction. So if I needed to take a rest or take some sort of break, some mental, like just a mental breather away from the task, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If it's intentional, if I have intention behind the rest, the intention behind taking a break or going for a walk or something like that, these are, if I have intention behind it, then there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something that we need to have awareness of. And if we're avoiding a certain feeling, if we're deciding to have this distraction as a way to escape our feelings, to suppress, to uh, to distract ourselves from the work because we're feeling a certain way, if these if those are the true distractors that are not intentional, and that's the self-awareness we want to build, but that's the discernment we need to make. So some distractions can serve us, like the meaningful breaks, the rest, spending time with your kids or spouse, and like spending time with your relationships with your family. These are great. These are great intentional things that you could incorporate within your day, because if we try to focus on our work and nothing else, if we're neglecting certain other areas of our life, then what's the point, right? What was the point of just trying to grind out in business, or trying to grind out on your health, or your one side of life, and neglect other areas? So I like to think of the game of life, where business is one game of one part of the game of life. Health is one part of the game of life. Relationships are one part of the game of life. And if we can incorporate all these things in our life and be able to um, have the service in a certain way, then we can have that balance. We can have that peace within us in our lives, because we have multiple areas of focus, and it's not just one particular focus. I'm going to be honest. Like if like not, I can guarantee you, not everyone is going to have one specific goal and just stick with it for an exorbitant amount of time. I have multiple goals. I have multiple goals. It's not just Alex Hormozy saying you have to have one goal, stick to it, and you'll accomplish whatever you want. But let's be honest. Let's be real with ourselves. We have multiple goals that we want to achieve. You want to have a good, positive relationship with your spouse, with your child. You want to have goals in your business. You want to be able to make a certain amount of income, which is great. You want to have a fitness goal or a health goal. You want to be able to uh, lose a certain amount of weight or gain a certain amount of muscle. There's nothing wrong with these. We have multifaceted goals that we have in mind, and these are just simple elements of life that we want to incorporate. So it's just a discernment of what distractions serve us versus what doesn't, and that's also something really a good thing to keep in mind. So that is, I would say, the more intentional you are with your life, with your goals, with whatever you want to actually focus on, the higher quality of life you can actually have. And that is it for me. I can open it up for Q&As. Hopefully you got something good out of this, some golden nuggets, and um, yeah,